Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. We are here today with Long Tran and Taz Gray. Long, he is the one of the co-founders for MSPMagic, and Taz is also a co-founder for MSPMagic. Taz, you have been on the show with us before. Long, you have not. So welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Yep. So I understand we are all spread out geographically all around the world right now. So Long, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're in Melbourne, Australia tonight, right now, right?
No, that's very correct.
Okay, and it's 6:30 in the morning for you.
It is. Just had my first coffee, so
Good, good. Okay, well, and Taz, are you in Athens, Greece?
I am indeed. Yep.
Awesome, and it's 11:30 p.m. for you there.
It is. Yeah, which is about dinner time for the locals.
Okay, all right. Well, that's fun and exciting. So I am kind of in the middle. I'm in South Carolina in the United States, and it's 4:30 p.m. So we're hitting everybody when we go on with my normal thing that says good morning, good afternoon. We're hitting everybody there. So that's great. Well, I understand. I understand we're going to be talking about MSPMagic, what's been going on since you guys were on the show last time. I think it's been about a year now, so I'm sure there's been lots of interesting developments along MSPMagic. So, what do you want to start with, Taz?
Yeah, let's start with that. I think so. It was May in 2021. I think was the last time we came on. So yeah, right on 12 months. And
Okay.
That was when we first launched MSPMagic and went to market. So it was obviously very early days for us, and still a year later is somewhat early days.
Okay.
And it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride in the last 12 months. We've obviously had a lot of engagement with a large number of MSPs. We had a really good response from your group last time we came on, so we're super excited about being here again.
Okay.
And obviously in 12 months, the product has developed. We've added new features, functionality. We've had a lot of feedback from the customers who are using it today. And of course, we're here today to demonstrate some of that newer functionality that your audience probably isn't aware of.
Great. Well, I am excited. Now, Long, where do you fit in all this?
So I initially, as you said, I am a co-founder of MSPMagic. Yep. I've always worked with Taz in our previous businesses, so came along for the ride.
That's awesome. Awesome. So what is your primary role, day-to-day role with MSPMagic?
I'm a bit more of the technical resource, subject matter expert, especially in the field we're talking about today, Endpoint Manager. I use this kind of almost on a day-to-day basis. So that's where I sit in all this.
Well, I am happy to tell you guys that I also have been using MSPMagic since you guys first came on the show. I get the email reports, and I also get that nice warm fuzzy feeling that your clients are protected and that their settings aren't being changed in their office tenants. So we really like that. So congrats on that. Well, maybe I can learn something new today from you guys. Maybe there's something that I haven't seen that's hidden or I have not been taken advantage of myself. So really excited to see what's been going on.
Yep, definitely. You and anyone else tuning in, we're keen to show you what we've done in the last 12 months. Hopefully it resonates with the audience and they can see the value and we can help them out.
That sounds perfect.
So, sorry, Scott, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was waiting on you.
Perfect. So, I guess just extending on what I was saying a moment ago, we've in this last 12 months, we've had a lot of feedback from the partners, and overwhelmingly, I think the thing that has come through the most has been the topic of Endpoint Manager, or some people it might still be referred to as Intune, but essentially Endpoint Manager, Intune, same thing. And the thing that we were asked about most often was, is there a way that we can use MSPMagic to deploy and manage Endpoint Manager policies across multiple tenants? So any MSPs out there who are using Endpoint Manager today will be well aware of the challenges that come about when you start to deploy this technology out to your clients. There's really no way to manage it on a multi-tenant basis, and that's a big pain point for a lot of MSPs. And so on the back of that, we've worked hard on developing functionality to help address some of those challenges that we're seeing out there in the marketplace today. There's also been a big upswing in MSPs generally in the adoption of Endpoint Manager. So a year ago, I think there were a lot less MSPs who were looking at the product, whereas fast forward 12 months, it seems to me that there's a lot more appetite for it out in the market as people start to understand the value and the power of the product. Hopefully that gives you a bit of understanding about what we're going to talk about here today. And so there's two parts to what we want to do. Obviously, we want to talk about the product and what it does, how it helps, but then of course, we want to jump into the product, do a bit of a demo, and that's where Long comes in. He's going to show us how to actually use it and talk about how it addresses some of the pain points that MSPs would have using Endpoint Manager. So Scott, I assume that you're familiar with Endpoint Manager, and I assume that people watching are familiar with it.
They may be more familiar with it than I am.
Well, that's good. I mean, essentially, just to quickly sort of explain for those who don't know, Endpoint Manager really is kind of like that cloud version of group policy that we had back in the AD days. You use it to monitor or to configure machines, to lock them down, as well as with Endpoint Manager, you get a bit more around security, conditional access policies, and things like that. Really good stuff, very powerful, and we're big fans. So nevertheless, what we have seen and what the feedback that we've had from the partners across some of the challenges has been there's basically, I'm going to say there's 5 kind of pain points or difficulties that come with this managing this across multiple tenants. And so the first thing is trying to create consistency across clients. So all MSPs are trying to align a standard stack to their customers. And of course, we do this for good reason, because it creates consistency. Consistency creates scalability, and scalability creates profit. And profit is the reason that most MSPs get into the game, usually. So having the ability to create and assign a standard set of policies across multiple tenants is one thing that you can't really do easily today. There's no tooling out there that we're aware of, at least, that allows you to do that easily. The only way you can really do that is if you've got the skill set to dive into Graph API, PowerShell, you've got a good handle on working with JSON data and that kind of thing. Or, of course, you can just log into each tenant and try to do it manually, but as you scale up, that really doesn't scale with you. So that's not really profitable. The next thing that we see is once we get that consistency in place, we've got a set of policies that go out to all of our clients. How do we make sure that we keep the standard set of policies up to date over time? Obviously, the product Endpoint Manager evolves, so things get rolled into that product, and we need to make sure that we're adding that new functionality to our clients and that we're doing that in a consistent manner so that all of our clients are as consistent as possible. Again, very difficult to do something like that without a tool. Again, that's also another thing that we've tried to address in what we're going to show you today. And then the next thing that we've seen and we've been asked for is around conditional access policies. So for those who don't know, conditional access policies essentially help secure logins to the Office 365 tenant. They determine whether the user requires MFA, for example, whether they can log in from certain countries, all that kind of stuff. Very important when it comes to securing the login process. So one thing that we've been asked for a lot is, can we create a way in which we can deploy conditional access policies across our customers and know for sure that the policy itself is assigned to the right people? The thing is, if you have a conditional access policy with all the right settings, but no one's assigned to it, or they've all been excluded from it, then it's effectively useless. and it doesn't provide any protection for the tenant. So you want to make sure when you do deploy these out that you are doing the assignment part properly and that you know for sure that it's been done and it hasn't changed over time.
Okay.
And then number 4 is variations to our policies. So in an ideal world, we'd make everyone exactly the same. However, we don't live in an ideal world, and we have customers who sometimes want things to be done their way, or they have certain circumstances which require some kind of variation to suit their needs. And as much as we try, there's just no getting away from that. So what we've also built in is the ability to roll out that standard set of policies, but allow for variations to the policies where necessary. And then finally, once we've got our policies deployed, they're all in place, they're all compliant, we're all happy with them. What we want to be able to do is be alerted to changes to those policies as they creep in over time, which is something that does happen, whether you like it or not. So being able to get visibility on that change, having the ability to manage that in a way where we either decide we're happy with that or we're not happy with that and we want to revert it back to the way it was. They're the 5 major challenges that MSPs have told us they want help with around Endpoint Manager. So that's what we're going to talk about and demonstrate today when Long jumps in. And that was really just a somewhat detailed summary, I suppose you could say, of what we've built.
Okay, excellent.
So unless there's anything you want to ask, I reckon we jump into the demo.
Yeah, we can. I did want to ask you, so what is the number one pain point that MSPMagic solves for the people using it, the companies using it? What's the pain point?
Of the 5 I just listed, or just more broadly speaking?
Well, just with MSPMagic altogether, what do you see, like when you created the product, you knew that there was a need for the product or you would have created it. So what did that really come out of with that need?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Scott. I probably should have talked about that before I dived into the new functionality. So thank you for pulling me up.
No problem.
Well, as I see it, what MSPs want to do is create consistent deployments across their environments. Sure. And very similar to what we've just talked about with Endpoint Manager policies, more broadly, what we want to do is have our tenants set up in a way that's consistent and that implements the best practices that we deem to be suitable for our customers. So basically, the challenge that comes with that is that there isn't a way to do that across multiple tenants that's at least provided by Microsoft. And we haven't seen too much come out in the vendor space to address these challenges. There's been bits and pieces here and there, but really, I think the pain point for most MSPs is that there hasn't been a comprehensive product that can try to address all of these in one go. And that's really the thing that we're trying to do here. Okay.
Sounds great. Well, you want to dive into the demo?
Sure. I guess I'll take over. As Scott said, my name's Long. I'm one of the co-founders of MSPMagic, and I'm kind of here to show you, a few of the new features of what we're calling MSPMagic's Endpoint Manager, Policy Manager. So let's just present my screen. Okay, can we see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is obviously our app, MSPMagic. This is just a bit of a testing demo environment I'm working in. Okay. And I'll show you the features in here because we don't want to touch our production environment for this.
Sure.
So as Tass said, if you've used Microsoft Endpoint Manager before, you kind of will already understand the challenges here. One of the biggest, most time-consuming issues is managing policies across multiple tenants. As we can see in MSPMagic, we've got all the tenants that are linked to our partner center displayed. And if you've used the product before, you'll understand how it all connects. And and we can set settings and get best practices that way. Today, though, we're going to focus primarily on Endpoint Manager, Policy Manager, and I'll just show you all the features and all the how we address those pain points that Tass talked about, how we get that consistent policy, how we get that continuous checking of policies are compliant and report back if they're not. When we say compliant, it just means that no one's gone in there and changed some added extra users or groups to be excluded, which can have drastic effects, as Tass mentioned. If you've got a policy that's meant to be blocking it or enforcing MFA for every one of your users to log in, but a technician's gone in there and excluded a group of users because they've complained too much, or he just needed to get them logged in and totally forgot about removing them from the exclusion of the policy, all of a sudden you've got a huge security hole, and there's nothing that's going to report that that's happened unless you're doing manual audits. So hugely inconsistent and inconvenient, which is why
I'm sure that happens every day.
It does. I mean, MSPs it's one of the biggest complaints that, oh, my techs have gone in and made this change when they really shouldn't have. And unless you're manually auditing these things, you really don't see visibility of that. And that's what this product's all about.
Okay, perfect.
All right, well, I guess I've kind of touched on some of those things that I want to show. So Tass mentioned we've built this from the ground up. I'm not going to go into all the other platforms in MSPMagic. We want to really, really feature this policy manager today.
Okay.
So for starters, if you're in the app, you can see we've got the policy manager here on the left.
Okay.
And just out of the box, the one thing I want to show is our pre-made policies. So these are, the best practice policies that have been provided by Microsoft and some of the other forums that we've kind of pulled together and are going to list out once it loads up.
So I've got a question while we're waiting on this to load. So Microsoft produces the product. They produce best practices. Why don't they just start and give it to you with best practices already implemented? I mean, that would totally negate the need for MSPMagic, but it's just kind of one of those things I'm thinking. I'm like, why in the world would they create something and then tell you, oh, you should be doing this? Seems like they would do that from the get-go.
You'd think that, and that's kind of what, as an MSP or as a business person, you would reach for immediately. But it's like, I guess, endpoint manager policies is like group policy. You can't say to every MSP that they should be implementing the same group policy, because each MSP might do things differently.
The environment's different.
Correct. And so you've always got your best practices, which are kind of your foundation, like your password policy should always be there across every AD that you deploy. But Microsoft aren't going to enforce that on you, and they're not going to give you that policy. They're just going to tell you this is what you should be doing, which is exactly what happens here.
Gotcha. All right.
Cool. So this is our policy manager, and as you can see, there are pre-made policies here. So we've got the initial conditional access policies that are best practices provided by Microsoft and reviewed by peers that can be added to our policy library, which we can then further add to our tenants. So I'm not going to go through all of these. There's plenty of learn more links where you can go and have a read about what they are, who they target, the impact to the tenants, and exactly what settings they'll affect.
Okay.
So
very nice.
If I can jump in here long quickly. So essentially, for MSPs who are just getting started with Endpoint Manager and want a starting, I guess, set of policies, this is a really good way to dive in. It's not too difficult. And what MSPMagic enables you to do with these is to bring them into your policy library. And once they're in here, as you'll see with the demo, it's quite easy to push them out to all of your customers with just a couple of clicks. So you don't have to jump into all the different tenancies and apply them manually.
Very good.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so the real kind of meat and bones of this is we're already using Endpoint Manager, let's say, and we've got our policies all in what's known as, let's say, a golden tenant, or a tenant that we want to make sure has all the up-to-date features and up-to-date settings that we want to deploy across all of our customers. So MSPMagic makes it possible to do that. I can ingest the policies from one tenant or multiple tenants, if that's what you want to do. For now, I've just created a source tenant with a couple of policies that I want to show MSPMagic ingesting. So as you can see, this is our source tenant. The settings are compliant. And if I go to the policies tab, this lists all the policies that exist in Endpoint Manager in this tenant at the moment.
Okay.
We can rehydrate the policies, and that'll pull in all the latest policies. As you can see, it was last updated 41 minutes ago. I'll just open up the admin center itself to confirm. As you can see, they are the actual policies in this tenant.
Also worth pointing out here too, Scott, I think for the people watching, if they've ever jumped into Endpoint Manager, which is where Long is right now, there's a whole bunch of blades that you've got to click through to see all the different policies. And one of the things that's nice about this policies tab in MSPMagic is that you can see the entire list of the policies in the tenant on one screen without having to navigate through multiple blades, which is quite handy.
Okay.
Cool. So as I was saying, so these are the policies that we want created across all our tenants. So simple things such as the OneDrive known folder move policy, which literally just takes your documents and your desktop and your pictures folder and pushes it into your OneDrive for Business for any corporate onboarded devices. So that's a policy that's commonly used day to day by every MSP. Things like set MS Edge default search provider to Google, because as much as we love Microsoft, not everyone loves Bing. So that's one of the policies we kind of want to push across all our tenants. There's a couple of others here that I've got, for example, a conditional access policy that blocks executive access unless they're using a compliant device. Hugely secure policy, very important, something that's, you definitely do not want any of your techs touching, because if they do allow an executive in from somewhere that's not compliant or safe, it could be a huge breach of compliance.
Okay.
So I'll show you exactly how we ingest these policies now, which is really easy. You just select on the policy itself. You can see that it's not managed. Let's have a look at the policy data. So this is the policy in JSON. It reflects the exact policy in the tenant itself. Under conditional access. All these settings and all these properties are reflected in JSON here.
Okay.
So what I want to do is take this policy, add it to our policy library so that we can use it later for all our other tenants. It's easy as clicking this button, add to the library. I can make some changes to what I want to call the policy, just to, if I do want to name it differently, and obviously give it a description as well. We'll just leave our default description there. Hit save. So that'll push it into our policy library so we can use later. I'm just going to grab some of these other policies as well so that I can show you exactly how we can redeploy those later. So I've just gone ahead and added 4 of the policies we use on a day-to-day basis into our policy library as quickly as that.
Very nice.
Let's have a quick look at the policy library. As you can see, these have all been imported from the tenant. And as before, I was showing you, we can also add pre-made policies, which will show up a little bit differently in our policy library.
Great.
Just like that.
Okay.
All right, so that's kind of the first step in this process. Now that we've got the policies in the policy library, we want to push these out to our tenants. So I'll quickly demonstrate that for one of the simpler made policies, and then I'll discuss some of the challenges behind this. So let's jump into our demo destination tenant, which currently has very little. Well, there's 2 policies in there, which we now know that we want. Let's say I do want to add one of the managed policies from the library, like the Windows 10 device. No, let's do set Microsoft Edge default search provider as Google. Now, as you can see, I can select that policy, click next, review the policy data itself. So where it's come from, the description, the source of the policy, all that information before, and see the actual policy data before I decide, oh, yep, that's correct. That's the one I want to add. Hit add. And that will go ahead and push it directly into the destination tenant. It just takes a few seconds for all the API calls. And there it is. So let me show that to you in the destination tenant. Let's open that Endpoint Manager. And as you can see, that's the policy there that we just pushed in, created at 6:58 a.m. Gosh, it's early.
So Scott, in case it's not totally obvious, what we're trying to do here is implement the don't repeat yourself principle effectively. So we've got our golden tenant. We use that to configure it once. We import it to the policy library, and then we can just start pushing that out to tenants with a couple of clicks.
Gotcha.
And there's no need for that process of manually recreating the policy over and over, which is obviously error prone. As soon as there's a human behind the process, there's likely to be a problem eventually. Sure. And just drives that consistency that we're looking for.
Got it.
So that, as you saw, was quite an easy policy to push in. There was no, I guess, tenant-specific variables in this policy that would really interfere with us, pushing this policy to multiple tenants at once. Or the real kind of nicety to what we've done with MSPMagic is, actually, let me just bring up that OneDrive for Business policy that we talked about before. This will kind of explain what I want to get at. So the OneDrive known folder move policy, if you have a look at it, one of the configurations in it requires the actual tenant ID of the tenant you're in. Now, obviously, if I ingest this policy and then push that out to our other tenants, it's not going to work. Or,
right,
even worse than that, it's going to have the wrong data. You're going to be joining your OneDrive clients to the wrong tenant. So this isn't going to work just by ingesting and pushing into other tenants. So what we've gone ahead and created is something called a variable manager, which will allow me to replace variables in the policies with custom variables that we create, or predefined variables that we've specified.
Such as the tenant ID.
Correct, you've got it. So as you can see, there's predefined variables in here: tenant ID, default domain, verified domains. But on top of that, we've also got other variable types which allow us to do substitution for things such as, I'll just get them created now because I know we're going to use them later, such as a security group. So that policy that I said was going to target executives, if I can type, I'm going to create that managed variable now, which targets the executive security group, so I can assign it to that policy, which will then get assigned to every tenant. Now, the issue is each security group is unique to each tenant. You can't just go, well, here's the name of the security group. You need to actually go and locate that group and basically add it to your policy so that you can assign it. So I've created that variable, which will let me, select the group for each tenant. So let me search for that security group. So in our demo destination tenant, it's called SG Executive, but it may be called something totally different in one of these other tenants. See, that hasn't been found in the MSPMagic testing tenant, whereas it is in all these other tenants because we want to keep our tenants consistent. So for now, I'm just going to go and select the ones that have it. The ones that don't, I need to obviously go and create that group or find a security group that matches to the executives group. Okay, I'll just save that now. So that's created a variable of type groups, which I can now use to assign to policies. Just kind of any questions around that so far, Scott? Or was that did that?
No, that makes sense. I was just waiting on to see how you were going to implement it.
Right.
To the testing one.
So now we go back into the policies that we've taken into our library. So what was the one with the tenant ID? The OneDrive known folder move. There it is.
Yep.
We can have a look at the policy data itself. And you can see this value here is actually the value of this tenant ID. So we don't want that going to our other tenants. What we're gonna need to do is,
well, like you said, if that tenant ID went to another tenant, you could be crossing data over.
Yeah.
Because it would define the wrong tenant.
Correct. So we need the specific tenant ID of the tenant we're pushing the data,
which is a variable
into. Correct. So we go and select the predefined tenant ID variable because that's obviously not something that we change. It just comes from Microsoft. So that's, you can see that's in two places. And now let me just confirm those two places. Yep, have been updated. So our policy in our policy library now contains this policy, which has been generalized, which we can now, push into every tenant, and the correct value of tenant ID will go into those tenants.
Great.
So that's the variable manager, which we found that was a hard requirement for us to be able to do this. Otherwise, basically, we couldn't do this repeating policy or this, policies across multiple tenants because it just wouldn't work.
It became pretty obvious early on that we needed to do something like this because otherwise what we found is you would have to push the policy into the tenant. You'd then have to log into the tenant and go in and modify parts of that policy to make it work for that specific tenant. So obviously we don't want to be doing that manual work if we don't have to be, and the variable manager seemed like the most obvious solution to that, and meant that we could reduce the work. Plus also when it comes time to evaluate compliance on policies, the variable substitution comes into play as well to ensure that it's comparing to tenant specific data rather than a generalized policy which potentially could report non-compliant when it shouldn't.
Makes sense to me. Very good.
Excellent. Okay, so I've just updated the policy to the OneDrive. Let's update that conditional access policy regarding executives as well, because we created a variable for that, as we can see. So we want this policy here to target the executives group of each tenant. So policies here, include groups. We're going to add that executive security group. And now this conditional access policy, when pushed into the destination tenants, will now include their proper security group within that destination tenant and not the original group that was ingested from the original policy.
Okay.
Excellent. So let's do that now. I just want to show it working and make sure that you've got a good grasp of what's going on here. Head back over to our policies and get those two added as well. So block executives. And as before we push it in, we can see that that variable manager has substituted that variable, which is the security groups GUID, into the destination tenants policy. So let's add that now. Jump over. Into conditional access.
So the one thing that we learned very early on here, Scott, is that we could have just pushed that policy in with the GUID from the other tenant, and the APIs tend to happily accept these things. So if you are manually importing and exporting data between tenants, it does kind of give you the impression that it worked, although the GUID for that particular group won't actually match the GUID that belongs to the group in the other tenant. So it's somewhat defunct.
Gotcha.
Yep. So it's just one of those things that you need to really kind of have multiple layers on that without this variable manager, it just wouldn't work. There'd be just too much kind of re-going over everything. So.
Yep. And when you're dealing with GUIDs and things like that, the margin for error becomes quite high because they're not very human readable, at least not for me.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense.
Okay, and let's add that other one that we did as well. Enable OneDrive known folder move. From our demo source, we'll have a look at the policy data, and as you can see, it's done the
There it is.
Tenant ID substitution. Let's get that added. Check that that's come in as well. Configuration profiles. Already 709, and as you can see, the destination tenant has its correct tenant ID. This was a source tenant over here, which had B1F whatever, and the destination has its correct tenant ID.
That's right.
It kind of works like magic.
That's right. Well, I wouldn't expect any less, Taz.
Now, so they're some of the basic policies that we can add in. Now, MSPMagic, whilst it would handle about 99% of the policy types, we are still working on some of the tricky ones, which we're going to get fixed up, and that's going to be ready very shortly.
Okay.
The next thing I kind of want to talk about is now that we've got these policies in a policy library, we don't want to have doing this exactly what I've done, going to each tenant, adding them one by one. It's very time consuming, and some people, or some MSPs will have 50, 60, maybe hundreds of policies that they want deployed across multiple tenants. It's challenging enough doing it in MSPMagic, but can you imagine that across 10 to 20 tenants in Endpoint Manager itself, going across multiple tenants, adding them like this? It's just not feasible. So what we've done is we've created what's known as templates, which we can add the policy sets to, and then just push that template across into each tenant as well. So let's do that now.
And Scott, you might recall the last time we came on, we talked about templates, but in the context of settings.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So what we've done is we've obviously extended the functionality of the templates to allow for policies as well. So it becomes a multifaceted template that includes best practices and policies.
Excellent.
So I'll just get these policies, I'll just add 1 or 2 of them to this template, and then I'll push that template into the tenant, and you'll see how it differs from a tenant specific policy. So I won't waste too much time here. I'll just add 1 or 2. Okay, so we've got I've just added 1 policy here to make it quick. So we've got a test template here that we can now go and apply to our tenant. So just imagine I've loaded all 50 policy types into there, and I do want it to apply to this demo destination tenant. So we can just apply the template itself that I've just created. No settings in that template. This new policy was added to it.
Okay.
And it tells us that it's going to create the policy in the tenant. So this will go through and automatically create, however many policies I've added to our template in the tenant.
Excellent. Done.
Done. And as you can see over here, I think it was a Windows 10 device compliancy. Refresh. Did I push it into the right tenant? Demo destination. Endpoint Manager is being a bit slow. But what I wanted to demonstrate is, as you can see, this came in via a templated setting, and these are all tenant specific settings, or tenant specific policies. So, as Tas mentioned before, if there is differences in policies, or if there's something that a tenant specifically wants that isn't part of your main headline template, you can have that different policy set in the tenant itself.
Okay.
All right. So the next kind of thing I wanted to show was, now that you have all these policies in your policy library, Microsoft tomorrow comes out and adds a whole bunch of new configurations. So what do I do? How do I go about and fix this? So
create a new
really simple. There are 2 ways we can do this.
Policy.
We can either create a new policy, or we can go update those policies in our source template.
Okay.
So let's say Microsoft changes something that requires us to add another setting to. Let's do a simple one so it's quick and easy.
Well, I mean, another use case here, Long, might be that if an MSP is still getting familiar with Endpoint Manager, they might start with a very small number of policies, and then as they mature their use of the product, they may see additional policies that they'd like to roll into their baseline configuration of a tenant. So basically what the templating allows us to do is to go back to that source tenant or any source tenant you like, really, set up the policy, ingest it as Long demonstrated at the beginning, add it to a template, and then that template will automatically push that out to all of the tenants that are assigned to the template. So in that way, you're saving a heap of time by not having to go into every single tenant to update it or to add a new policy. Rather, you can just kind of do it once, push it out to all of your customers, and know that it's been done in a fraction of the time.
Okay.
Yeah. And it really is a fast evolving thing, I find, with Endpoint Manager. And you speak to any MSP who's using it, they will say, like, it's constantly, there's new settings, there's new features, there's new things that we want to roll out to our clients, but doing it at scale is very challenging.
Well, I mean, I guess Tas kind of touched on everything that I wanted to explain there, but the last bit of it is, like I said, if you do have changes in the policy and you do need to update them, So what's in our policy library, what we can do is just select the policy in our policy library. And there is a button here that just says update the policy from the source. So if you've made changes, all you need to do is do that, hit the update policy from source. It'll go and grab, that source policy again, update it in the policy library, and then we can push that out across all the tenants that have been assigned that policy automatically.
Okay.
And now for the kind of last piece, which is the last thing that Tass mentioned, was now that we've got all these policies in there, how do we maintain consistency? How do we know that someone hasn't gone in there and updated it or changed them? So let me just bring that up.
Because they do. It happens.
It happens, of course. I mean, technicians will go in there with all the best of intentions and make a change to get people working or what they think would be best, but it may not be something that they were supposed to do or even allowed to do.
Especially during a troubleshooting phase as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we see happen all the time. So one of these really dangerous ones, like I explained before, this blocking executives from accessing a tenant unless they've got a compliant device. Let's say one of the technicians went in there, and I'll do it right now so you can see the conditional access policy. So, one of the executives calls up, says he can't work. I'm a technician. I'm freaking out. So what I do is I go in here and I exclude that user just to get him up and working. Now that gets the person operational, but as a technician, I've gone in there and made those changes, but the MSP is not going to be able to see what's happened there unless they manually come back to this and audit it, or unless they've got alerting procedures on any time someone makes a change to a policy. But there is really no functionality anywhere in Microsoft Stack or in any other kind of tools that we've seen that will give us this kind of reporting. So MSPs will kind of have to manually go and build that themselves, or they've got technicians coming in auditing this once a month to try to make sure it's consistent. No one's gone in there and made changes that are poorly affecting their environments. So let me just run a quick automation, and this will go off and check compliance and report back on what's different.
So I remember when y'all first got started with this, I was an early adopter. And one of the things that I noticed is that I may get an email saying that it's not compliant, but it wouldn't run again for another 24 hours. So y'all have already fixed that, and actually you can run it anytime you want, right? You can run automation.
Yep, that was feedback from a lot of the MSPs using the platform, saying that they'd gone in and updated, and now they wanted to run automation immediately. So we've obviously added that functionality in.
Excellent.
So that our customers could do that.
Yep, that was a big roadmap item, as well as, I guess while we're waiting for this, we have also added a bunch of new settings into the settings tab, Scott, that you may not have seen, and we obviously continue to add to those over time.
Well, while we're waiting on this, we're talking about, policies and Endpoint Manager. Are you planning to roll out this to any other policy types, such as Microsoft Defender for Office 365, Microsoft Cloud App Security Policy, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint?
Yeah, no, we definitely. As you've identified, Endpoint Manager is what we target initially in this release, and there's been a huge amount of work getting the framework in place, because as Long mentioned earlier, we built this from the ground up. So now that we've got that framework in place and the ability to import and push out tenants and put variables into the policies as well, which we just showed you, we can start to extend this out across different policy types that are not part of Endpoint Manager. So the ones you mentioned, Defenders, Cloud App Security, and I'm sure there are others that we haven't even thought of yet. But yeah, we are definitely planning to to spread across the entire policy sets, I suppose you would say, to give better coverage of all of this. But yeah, given that we're where we are, we haven't quite got to that point yet. But stay tuned; that'll be the next webinar.
Well,
yeah,
I see the
definitely.
automation. The automation has had a chance to run, so it's now showing and producing a non-compliant status.
Yep. So, the policy that I went in there and adjusted as a technician, you can see now the policy data. So this is on the left side here is what's in our library. These are the groups that we wanted to exclude. It didn't include that, actually. And because I've edited the data in the policy library itself and removed that group, as you can see, and excluded someone else, it's now no longer compliant to what's in our policy library. So what we can do, this will report non-compliant. So every time automation runs, it'll check in and send you an email that this policy is non-compliant because someone's obviously gone and changed it. What we can do is come back in here, compare the data from what's in the library to what's in the tenant. And if we need to, we can just hit the fix policy button and that'll go and redo this and push the policy into the tenant or fix up the policy in the tenant, I should say. Now, hopefully, you don't have technicians jumping in here and making changes as policy all the time. So this should be relatively a low touch thing. If you are finding that you're having to do this too much, maybe have a chat with your technicians that they shouldn't be doing this, and there might be some more training that needs to be done. But that's, I'm kind of wary of time. So,
yeah. Well, can we run the automation? I want to see a full circle.
Oh, yep. This is the testing environment, so we've kind of got a few things that are still happening. I think the last build may have broken some of these functionality, but let's try going through this again.
Because theoretically, the end result should be that it now is in a compliant state.
Yes, of course. But as I said, this is definitely our testing dev environment. So
Gotcha.
There's a couple of things that I know the devs are still working on at the moment because there are new functionality pieces we want to push out as quickly as possible.
I think it finished.
Oh, wow, that was quick. Okay. If we refresh the compliance, there you go. So now you can see that.
So that aspect is compliant now. Okay.
So you can see that it's gone and fix this up, push the included groups back in. So if we look at the actual policy itself, let me jump into it.
And now there won't be any excluded users.
So no one's in there anymore.
All right.
Yep.
Very nice.
All right. So that's pretty much it that I wanted to show. There's plenty more, and obviously we can deep dive down this rabbit hole, but I know we're kind of struggling for time. So I'll hand it back to Tass and he can kind of wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you, Long.
No worries.
Very nice demonstration.
All right, so I think that was pretty clear through the demo what the pain point was, I hope, and how we've set out to address this in a way that makes it really easy to replicate across your tenancies, and then more importantly, how to customize the tenant-specific information, and then keep an eye on the compliance over time so we can see if there's been any drift in what we set up.
Yeah.
At the early stages. So it's that visibility piece I think ongoing is massively valuable and brings a lot of peace of mind.
Well, just seeing all of those, as I mentioned earlier, I use MSPMagic as well with my clients, and just seeing those emails that say compliant. It's like you've got somebody going back there and doing all those searches, auditing all those settings, and they're all coming back good. So that's just a nice peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And so having that branch out into policies is that next level of compliance really. And we're here today to let you know that it's here. And basically, if you're interested in this, if you are using Endpoint Manager and you want to explore this a bit further, you can hit the website, book a demo. We'll do an onboarding call with you, take you through it. We can show you how it all works. No cost to do any of that. And I think we mentioned last time, nothing's changed, but the first 3 tenants you onboard into MSPMagic, they're free for life. So you can really get in there, onboard your golden tenant, so to speak, and then you can onboard 1 or 2 more tenants and use those as testing grounds to push policies around and have a good play with the product, and it costs you nothing. And like I said, we'll do that onboarding call with you as well to really help you get started quickly.
Well, you can't argue with that price. That's a great price. It's a new twist on the NFR. So,
it is indeed
definitely. But you guys are being very gracious and allowing 2 more tenants on that. So, and I don't think you really care how the MSP uses those other 2 tenants. If they want to use it for their clients and charge, I mean, they can. So, but the 4th one, 5th one, 6th, up to 100, they need to sign up with MSPMagic for the full show. So
pretty much. Yep.
Sounds great. Well, I can't thank y'all enough for your time. Is there any last minute thought that you want to share with the audience?
I think we've said it all, and we've shown what we came here to show, Scott. So we hope that people found that useful, and hopefully they see some value and they get in touch. Reach out anytime, and we look forward to coming back in another 6 months' time and showing you what we've done.
I'm excited to see the changes. And by the way, if anyone is watching this and you do reach out to Taz and the team, just let them know that you saw the demo today in IT Business Owners Group, and that will be great. So thank you guys so much again for your time, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. We'll see you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Scott. Thanks, Seth.
See you. Bye-bye.